Welcome to a special edition of Lunchtime on LinkedIn Live. This is Rhett Power and my series of the Power Lunch. And this is going to, normally we do the program on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday around 12 noon. Today we have a special guest that I had to schedule when I could get him. But I'm happy to do that because I think his information and what we're going to talk about today is really, really important to your business. The point of the show is to have the best and the brightest on the program, to have thought leaders, CEOs, best-selling authors, people who are really doing important work so that we can learn from them. And that's the whole point. Now, the fun part is we can be, and the show can be interactive if you ask questions. I know Nicolaj and I, if there are questions on the program today online, we will certainly try to answer them. Absolutely. If we don't get to them, certainly ask them on LinkedIn because I know that we'll certainly want to answer those questions for you so that we can serve you better. The program is broadcast not only on LinkedIn, but it's LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and I think a couple other platforms. So it is across a wide number of live platforms. It's brought to you by Social Live. We're using their platform to do that. And now, if you like the program, give it a like or share so that other people can learn and benefit from the things that we learned today. Now, as my promise to you to have the very best, I do have one of the very best people for you today, Dr. Nicolaj Siggelkow. Sorry. He's David M. Knott Professor at the Wharton School at UPenn. He's a former department chair of the management department there. He's also co-chair of the Mack Institute for Innovation Management. And we're here to talk about his new book, Connected Strategies, the new book title, Building Continuous Customer Relationships for Competitive Advantage. Nicolaj, thank you for joining me on the show.
Rhett, thank you for having me.
So what do you mean by connected strategy? I think is the first question, because
that's a reasonable question to have.
Because we live in a connected world, right? And so
right.
What does that mean to today's business, and what does it mean in general?
Yeah. So what we've seen across a whole set of industries is that firms are really fundamentally reshaping the way they connect to their customers. Right? Sort of rather than waiting there for a customer to come in with a particular need, firms are now much more continuously connected to customers, allowing them to anticipate needs and to have many more interactions with that customer. So, if you think healthcare, I think is a nice example, right? It used to be only if something really bad happens to me, am I going to see my doctor or get admitted to a hospital? And then while I'm in the hospital, right, I have all this attention on me, right, 24/7.
Right.
I'm really well connected. And then at some point, the hospital decides, okay, that's enough, and they discharge me. And then I'm again completely unconnected. And we're basically waiting for something catastrophic to happen to me again to get readmitted, right? And, once you say it that way, it already sounds not particularly efficient, right? But that's sort of the way we're currently delivering healthcare and lots of other, services and products. And so that's kind of the idea of being continuously connected to the customer. We can both make the customer more happy, and we can probably provide our services in a more efficient way.
Are there examples of companies that are doing this really well, who are thinking about this more creatively, thinking about this as ways to create better customer experience, better product? Are there companies that are really doing it in different sectors?
Yeah. So, one example would be Disney World. And I know when was the last time you went there, but it used to be that the only transaction that you had was your ticket, right? And you hand over your ticket, and that was sort of the interaction that you had. Now with a Magic Band, you go to a Disney World, and first of all, your life as a customer is made easier because that Magic Band opens up your hotel room, that allows you to enter the fast lane, that allows you to purchase merchandise in the park. So from my side, my experience has been made easier. At the same time, it allows Disney to know where everyone is within the park, and that now lets them direct traffic, saying, oh, look, here's an attraction that has a short line. Why don't you walk over there? Or as a matter of fact, Disney is able to what they call jumpstart operations every morning, because it used to take quite some time for people to get to that attraction that's at the end of the park, right? And so I basically have idle capacity sitting there for a couple of hours.
Right.
So now you can have, right, every attraction run at good capacity throughout the day. So it's sort of, again, both this example on the one hand, right, I as a customer, I'm happier because my life is made easier and my experience is better, while at the same time, again, Disney has the ability to run the park more efficiently. Right? So that would be one example.
I mean, it gives them really good data too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, right?
Really
And
good data on what people want.
exactly, right? And so this is sort of getting to a kind of, in some sense, a repeat loop, right? Sort of they are able, first of all, they learn more about me as a particular customer. And so they can, over time, make better and better suggestions to me. What kind of rides do I like? What kind of food might I like, right? Do I want to wait in this line or in that line for my food? At the same time, though, they also learn more about customers like me. And that allows them over time to understand, okay, I may need more, frozen yogurt stands or less of this, or we want to maybe develop a certain attraction because we know there are enough customers out there to like that, right?
So how does that sort of play out in terms of competitive advantage, right? So looking at this connectivity and looking at what you're talking about, this strategy really, it's not.
Yeah.
How does that play out with competitive advantage? How does that give you a competitive advantage?
Yeah. Well, so
if everybody's doing it, if everybody has access to it.
That's exactly the point, right? And I think it's sort of interesting to think about that quite often. The technologies that underlie these connected strategies are sort of freely available, right? Or others are actually developing, right? Sort of Uber did not develop cell phones, GPS, and Google Maps, right? But they use those different elements and said, wow, we can put these elements together to have actually a quite disruptive business model. Mm-hmm. So that's the good news, right? You don't have to become a technology company to create a connected strategy. The bad news is the one that you just pointed out. Since I have access to it, all my competitors have access to the same technology, right? And so a lot of these connectivity elements will become sort of table stakes, right? And everyone will have it. So kind of the first answer is not having a connected strategy is probably going to be a source of competitive disadvantage.
Right.
Right. So you need to have some kind of connected strategy just to be in the game. Now, in order to create an advantage relative to your competitors, kind of the point we make in the book is that what we think is kind of we have a 4R model, and it's like the fourth R, the repeat dimension, the ability to do this again and again with a customer and learn more and more about that customer and learn about customers like me. That will now allow me to refine, for instance, my product offering. That is really where the source of competitive advantage is coming from. It is kind of the knowledge, the insight that you're getting from these repeated interactions. And that's probably much harder to copy than just to copy a feature on an app, for instance.
Right. When I was running my company, I don't think we had a competitive advantage strategy, and that's really interesting to me. I don't think we ever broke it down in that way. Is that so? What you're saying really is that's smart to do.
Oh yes, no, I think we want to always kind of distinguish between, on the one hand, what we might call just best practices, right? And those are things we just have to do, otherwise we're not even in the game.
Right.
And then there are things that we do that others have a harder time actually replicating, right? And that is really what can then create our sustainable competitive advantage relative to our competitors. And so, again, since we've just been through the IPO time of Uber and Lyft, right, the key question was not, why is Uber better than cab companies? Right, that's an easy question, right? Because yes, they have a better product that we can create at a lower cost. So clearly they are disruptive, and that's what makes connected strategies disruptive, because they create sort of both more value for customers at lower cost. But the key question for evaluation of Uber is, why is Uber better than Lyft? Right? Because now, sort of we shifted out, we call this the efficiency frontier in the industry, right? So now we are kind of breaking the traditional trade-off between willingness to pay and cost. But that's not enough, because now that I'm on this new efficiency frontier, someone else might come and just put themselves exactly where I am, right? And so the answer to why is Uber better than Lyft is, I think, a much more difficult question to answer than, why is Uber better than cab companies?
What is let's say I'm a small, medium-sized enterprise, right? And we often talk about these disruptive companies like Uber and things. How do I use the book to say, really have a competitive advantage in my market? I'm a small company, maybe regional, maybe just even in my small area, my city. How do I use that strategy to be to sort of be the best in my market there?
Yeah. So the fun thing about writing this book was that we were actually teaching the book while writing it. So it took us a bit longer to write it.
Sure.
But what we did now in the book, actually, we have 3 chapters in the book that we call workshop chapters, and they are full with worksheets. So to address, in some sense, exactly the question that you raised, so how am I going to do this? So we actually lay things out, in some excruciating detail, in some sense, in the book. On our website, you can also download those worksheets and really fill them out. And we have, examples on, worksheets that are filled out for people to get sort of jump started on that process. So for your particular question, usually a good starting point is what we say is sketching out the customer journey. Your customer, what's kind of the journey they go through.
Right.
And what we find is, right, sort of quite often when managers think about sort of what are value drivers for my customer, they focus immediately on the tangible and intangible aspects of their product or of their service, right? Sort of what's the quality or how fast and how good and, maybe what the brand is. And clearly that's important. But it's also important to realize that a customer usually has a much longer journey with you that sort of starts with becoming even aware of the need that I'm trying to fulfill, right? And customers are not always becoming aware of their needs at an optimal time, right? So when I'm 60 and I say, oh, now it's time for me to save for retirement, that's not an optimal time to become aware of that need, right? So I have sort of this latent need, but I may not become aware of that need. So now assume I became aware of that need. Now what, right? So what are actually all the options out there? So helping a customer to search for all the options that are out there is valuable. Then helping the customer to decide what is actually the right option for me to pick. Okay, so now I know I need to invest in some broadly diversified equity fund. Okay, but now how am I going to do and order that, right? Do I need a broker? Can I do it myself? How do I pay for it, right? And so there are lots and lots of different pieces along that customer journey where there are pain points. And then at some point I sell you my product, right? And so quite often managers come back to me and say, well, Nicolaj, you talk about all this differentiation, but I'm in a commodity product, right? I'm selling an S&P 500 index fund. Now you tell me, how am I going to differentiate myself on selling S&P 500 index funds, right? And you're absolutely correct. And that's when it becomes important to say, well, but you need to understand, right? There are all these other pain points. And all of a sudden, if I can help you there, that's why I'm going to you and interact with you as a company, not because you have the better S&P 500 index fund, right, but because you've removed all of these other pain points from my life, right? And so I think that's kind of why it is so important to put yourself into the shoes of a customer, right? Think through what is sort of that customer journey that customer goes through, then identify the pain points, and then ask yourself, okay, so what kind of information would I need in order for me to be able to relieve that pain point, right? And I think that gives you a much more structured way, because I think a lot of companies right now, lots of businesses are in this mode of, okay, I need to connect and I need to gather as much data as I can, right? And I think right now a lot of companies are exactly stuck at that point. Right. Because now I know, for instance, every click you've ever did on my website. Well, that's great, but now what? Right? So now I have all of this data, but I have no idea of actually how that translates into some kind of actionable thing that I can do. And so understanding, coming first from the customer perspective, asking what are the pain points, and then asking, okay, what is actually the data that I would need? I think that's a much more sort of sensible way to go about that.
Yeah, much better. I mean, that makes much more sense. And I think you sort of answered the question, right, about it's about the difference between Uber and Lyft now, right? And it's that's that delivery. It's the delivery, really.
Yes.
How can you lower costs by creating a connected value chain? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah. So think about grocery. Okay.
Okay.
And so one of the biggest problems, big problems that Whole Foods has is, how many avocados should I stock? right? So typical operations problem, right? They rot, but at the same time, I don't want to run out. So that's kind of a typical operations problem. So now contrast that to Blue Apron or HelloFresh. So these meal kit providers that send you every week a box of food.
Right.
Funnily enough, Blue Apron never runs out of avocados. You know why? Because if they don't have avocados, it's asparagus on the box this week.
Right.
Okay. And so if you understand your customer well enough, once in a while you're actually able to provide the customer with a solution that the customer is basically indifferent about, but it's way more efficient for you to deliver at that time. Right? So I don't care whether it's avocados or asparagus in the box this week, but if it's for you much more efficient to send me asparagus this week, do that. Right? Or I don't care whether I go to this attraction and then that attraction or on the other order. Well, if it's much cheaper for you to provide me a ride right now on this attraction because there's a short line, well, send me over there. Right? And so this is kind of how it's not just about my life as a customer is made better, but also your life as a company can be improved by understanding those needs of the customers well, and then matching you with the right stuff that I have available at this particular point in time.
Right. What growth opportunities do you think kind of arise because of this sort of increased connectivity?
Yeah, I think it's, and sort of one way we're trying to cut into this idea about connected relationships is actually by distinguishing 4 different types of connected customer experiences. And I think each of them kind of will address a particular different need. And so the way we've just talked about sort of this customer journey, one way kind of to think about the different connected customer experiences is that they're acting on different parts of that journey.
Okay.
So one kind of experience we call a respond to desire connected customer experience. So here you have a customer who knows exactly what he or she wants, right? I need a ride from here to the airport right now, or I need some accommodation next weekend in Chicago. So now a customer knows exactly what they want, and we basically want to give that customer a button they can press and then have the rest of that customer journey be as smooth as possible.
Right.
Now, sometimes, right, customers don't quite know what they need, right? I mean, I know I want to watch a comedy tonight, and if Netflix said, well, that's great, Nicolaj, because we've got 10,000 comedies, that's not helpful, right? But if Netflix can say, well, here are the 5 that you might enjoy, and by the way, here are 2 new releases you may not know about, right? That's helpful. So we call that a curated customer experience, a curated offering connected customer experience.
Right.
Then, as we said earlier, customers are not always aware of their needs, right? So if I can maybe nudge the customer to take their medication or to keep up with their fitness exercises or whatever, so we would call that a coach behavior connected customer relationship. So I'm helping the customer become aware of their needs. And then once in a while, we have these connected customer relationships where we call it automatic execution, right? Where my printer automatically reorders toner when it's about to run out, right? And so I don't even have to get involved. And so I think all of those 4 connected customer experiences are ways of engaging the customer more, right? Increasing the happiness of the customer, being able to get that customer to come back again and to potentially attract new customers, right? So I think all of those 4 are some sense ways to kind of grow our market share or our sales. But really importantly is that we don't believe there's sort of one size fits all, right? We don't certainly believe automatic execution is always the best solution, right? Some customers like it, some customers won't like it. And so we really have to understand our customer well enough to know what is actually the right type of connectivity that customer will actually enjoy.
Do you see that there are some partnerships between non-traditional companies that can really take sort of advantage of this connectivity or a strategy? I don't know what I'm thinking of, but I mean, are there new products that you think are going to come out of this, and new ways to sort of new markets for companies with a strategy like this?
Yeah, so in the second part of the book, so the first part of the book is all about what we call the connected customer relationships. The second part of the book is what we call connected delivery models, right? How are you actually creating these great experiences at a reasonable cost? And so we go through a whole set of different what we call connection archetypes or architectures of how firms are connecting with different players in the ecosystem. And I think one important point is that let's say as I'm learning more and more about you as a customer, I may learn about certain needs that you have, but I may not be the right one to fulfill those needs, right? So let's say I'm a healthcare system and I really understand you very well, and now I understand that you have a insurance need, and I actually understand they have a certain mobility need, right? Because you just came in and you had a broken leg, and now you cannot drive to work. So I know you have a mobility need, and I may know you have an insurance need. I don't probably want to integrate into becoming an insurance company and a mobility company as well, right?
That makes
So
sense.
now I need to create a different, what we call connection architecture, that says, well, okay, maybe I'll create a certain market space or marketplace where it's very easy for you to find mobility solutions or to shop for insurance or whatever, right? And if I can kind of create those archetypes or architectures as well, I can really, what we say, move up the hierarchy of needs, right? I am now not just the guy who's fixing your broken leg, but I'm actually helping you live with a broken leg, right? And that's really what you needed me for, right? Ideally. And so if I'm able to fulfill also these services, well, now again, right, my surgeon might be as good as the other surgeon down the road in that hospital, but if I can promise you, well, I'm not just helping you with the surgery, but I'm also helping you with how you deal afterwards with that. Well, you said, well, I'd rather go to that hospital than to this hospital.
Well, you're taking care of some of that thinking for them, right? And some of that research. I mean, if I just broke my leg and I know that for the next 3 months, I'm going to have to get an Uber every day or a car service or something. Yep. I need now I need my food delivered, my groceries delivered because I can't go to the store, right? I need my pharmaceuticals delivered. So if you're thinking ahead and helping them solve some of those issues that they haven't even considered yet while they're getting the cast on the leg, right? It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's exactly it's a very nice example of what you just said about awareness of need, right? At some point, you would become aware of your need, right? You say, oh, I just ran out of food. What am I doing now, right? And so that's maybe not the optimal time, right? And if we can make you aware of those needs and maybe find some solutions for you early, again, that is sort of value we're creating for you. Now, I think, again, sort of points to another interesting point here, and that is the information. That's a really and funnily, this is about trying to build up that trust relationship, right? Becoming a trusted partner with your customer, right? So I'm now saying I'm not just helping you with your leg, I'm helping you with mobility, I'm helping you with shopping. You as a customer say, well, I'm not quite sure I want to give you all this information about, right, how much milk is in my fridge, right? Sort of, what are you going to do with this data? And so I think the way these connected relationships evolve over time is that customers say, look, let me give you a slice of my data here, and you really show me how you can make my life better. And if I see that, then maybe I'm willing to give you another slice of my data, right? And so now I'm telling you about other needs that I have. And if you can really say, oh, you're really using that information in a way that makes my life better, right? Now I'm starting to develop that trust, and I'm willing to share some more information with you.
And you don't become a nuisance, right? It's that line. Where does that line, where I feel like you're hounding me, emails every day, phone call, yeah. Right.
Yes. No, I think there are actually two interesting bright lines here. The one line is between kind of nuisance and help, right? And I think that is very much driven by not really understanding customer needs, right? And so we are just gathering all of this information and we're sending you all of this information without really personalizing it, because I just hope that some of that communication might be helpful for you. I think the second bright line, again, we like to use the Disney example for that. So if you imagine you're walking in Disney World and you're walking with your daughter, let's call her Sophia, and here comes Jack Sparrow, right, sort of in costume, and comes up to Sophia and says, "Hi, Sophia, how are you?" Right? Now, it used to be that this was kind of difficult to create, right? Usually there was like a guy sitting in a bush, right, and you would go up there and say, "Oh, Sophia is coming around the corner in the morning, in a moment," right? And so he would go on his two-way walkie-talkie to that character playing Jack Sparrow. So all very cumbersome, right? Now, of course, Sophia is wearing her magic band, all right? And so Jack Sparrow has a little handheld device that tells him, oh, that's Sophia who's coming, right? So it's much easier to create that experience. So now Jack Sparrow goes, Sophia, I hope you remember that we met last year in Anaheim. right? Because Jack Sparrow not only knows it's Sophia who's coming, but he has now also the records of any interaction that Sophia had with any character in any theme park, right? And then Jack Sparrow goes, you know what, Sophia, and I'm really proud of you that you just made it through level 12 of the online Pirates of the Caribbean game. That was a really tough level, and it's so great that you did that. Now, for Sophia, right, it's like the best day in her life, right? She says, wow, right? I mean, Jack Sparrow knows me, he remembers me, and he's rooting for me in the Pirates of the Caribbean video game. I mean, what could be greater, right? And you as a parent go, man, that's creepy.
That's creepy.
Right? And so I think there is this other fine line between, on the one hand, magic, because this is really a magical experience for Sophia, and creepiness, right? And that's sort of why I said earlier, it becomes really important for us to understand the preferences of customers in terms of what is the right level of connectivity, what's the right amount of decisions that the customer wants to give to you and they want to retain themselves. Right? That's why automatic execution is certainly not always the best solution, right? And so we need to really understand different customers, their preferences, and even the same customer in different occasions might have different preferences, right? So if my printer reorders toner, that's wonderful, right? I don't derive much pleasure out of reordering toner, right? So automatic execution might be wonderful. But when I sit in front of my TV, I'm not sure I want to have Netflix start streaming a movie immediately. I say, okay, wait a second, right? I mean, maybe give me like a choice here of 5 or 6 things rather than just assuming, oh, you know what I want, and just immediately streaming, right? And so I think that becomes really important in creating these connected strategies.
Do you think AI is going to play a really important role in that process?
Absolutely, right? I mean, that's kind of in part the link between all this data that we are gathering, right, and then making it actionable. Now, at the same time, though, so this is like the promise of big data, right? But I think there's also a lot of value in what might call small data, right? Of actually living with a particular customer, really understanding, right, that customer's willingness to pay, drivers, pain points, concerns, right? And that quite often is actually better derived from sort of ethnographic work where you really kind of embed yourself with the customer for a while, rather than just sitting in front of a big spreadsheet and then try to infer possibly kind of what the customer wants.
And that's certainly easier if you're a smaller business and you have a lot more interaction personally with that customer, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So where can they get the book? Where can they find out more about your work and you and your fellow authors' work and pick up the book?
Great. So, all the retailers should have it. Your favorite online retailer, starting with maybe Amazon or Barnes & Noble, they carry the book. It has been out now for not quite 2 months, so it's still fairly fresh off the press.
Yep.
You can go to our website called connected-strategy.com. And so we've put a lot of content on that site, so including these worksheets that you find in the book, but if you want to have larger ones to fill out, you find them there with some examples. We have a whole bunch of podcasts on there with some of the characters from the book and lots of other companies. Because I think that the neat thing about connected strategies is it's so widely available to and applicable. So is it for-profit companies or not-for-profit companies, and small companies, large companies, incumbents, new entrants? I think there's sort of this general trend out there, and so that's we try to make it applicable to as many people as possible. So those are kind of the two starting points, I would say. And of course, you can also go to my website, nicolajsiggelkow.com, and find some information there.
Well, I know that I kind of agree with you in the sense that I don't think anybody's safe from disruption, right? Big or small. And so I think this is imperative in terms of really the way that you're going to have to do business in the future. I think that this work that you're doing is really, really important. What we'll do is we'll put the book up on LinkedIn, on the site, and in the header or in the messages so that people can find a link to it and a link to your site as well. Guys, this has been a special edition of Power Lunch on LinkedIn Live. And tune in next week. We've got a great lineup of people. You can go to the website at powerlunch.live to check on that lineup and see who we have coming on. And Nicolaj, thank you so much for being on the program and and sharing with the audience your work. I think it's really important.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Rhett.
All right, and you have a good day, and we'll talk soon. This is not the last conversation, I hope, because I think we could spend a week or more on this topic, because I think it's that critical.